What if the border that once hummed with the gentle rhythm of truck engines, the clang of metal, the fresh scent of dairy farms, suddenly became a battlefield where a single president's threat could erase decades of partnership in one sunrise? Imagine the roar of factories silenced, the scent of pine forests replaced by the sharp sting of tariffs, and the question hanging in the air: can a nation survive when its neighbor pulls the economic rug? Previously we described how Canada and the United States moved goods as easily as breathing auto parts, aluminum, forest products, milk every day, creating an unshakable bond. Now Trump's harsh, unpredictable tariffs loom, targeting oil, steel, aluminum, agriculture. He announced today that new duties could start as early as tomorrow, casting a dark cloud over the flow of 4 million barrels of Canadian crude each day, the United States' largest supplier. Canada's leaders respond fiercely: "We will not surrender." The tension rises like a storm-charged sky. What will Canada do when its primary market threatens to close its doors? The next chapter unfolds with the Trans Mountain Pipeline expanding Canada's reach to the Pacific. Suddenly, oil can travel to Vancouver's bustling port, where the salty sea breeze mixes with the metallic odor of crude, and massive tankers set sail toward China and Japan. Data from the China Institute reveal that half of these shipments already head east, a reality that makes Washington's officials uneasy. Ottawa warns, if pressure grows, new oil deals with China will be signed. Protectionist policies risk raising prices for Canadian oil, making it more attractive to Asian refiners and less so to American ones. The world watches as trade logic twists, closed doors push buyers to new horizons. The question lingers: will the United States lose a vital source of energy, and will Canada's newfound Asian market reshape the global oil balance? Finally, history echoes. 50 years ago Canada debated a third option to lessen dependence on its southern neighbor, and today that debate resurfaces with renewed urgency. The European Union, through the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, offers near-zero tariffs, while distance remains a challenge. Environmental groups and indigenous communities raise their voices, but the strategic need for coastal access intensifies. Canada stands at a crossroads where the scent of fresh-cut timber mixes with the diesel fumes of pipelines, and every decision could tip the scales of power. As the U.S. president hints at reinstating duties, will Canada sign a landmark oil pact with China, or will a fragile compromise keep the old partnership alive? The answer will determine not only the fate of two nations but the rhythm of global trade for years to come. Summary of the previous part: the pipeline's capacity to transport oil to Asia has evolved, with tankers now making their way to China and other locations. Not long ago, this prospect seemed far-fetched. Alternatives to America's market were hard to find. However, recent developments are shifting that perspective. In a startling reveal, data from the China Institute indicates that half of Vancouver's oil exports now flow directly to China. This poses a daunting question to the United States: are you ready to lose a crucial ally? As the tension escalates, Canadian crude oil appears to be growing costlier under President Trump's looming tariffs. This could ultimately make it more appealing to Chinese refiners, who are eager for suppliers. Ottawa isn't sitting idle. They're sending a clear message: if unilateral pressure continues, new oil agreements with China may be on the horizon. Following Trump's announcement of sweeping tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China, anxiety is spreading fast. Analysts warn that protectionist policies might disrupt supply chains, leaving American consumers with inflated prices. These tariffs threaten to weaken the competitiveness of U.S. refineries in a global market eager for Canadian crude. If prices soar for American consumers, it's only a matter of time before the tables turn, and Canada seeks alternatives. The Trans Mountain Pipeline represents a pivotal step in this strategic realignment, hinting at a larger plan to foster ties with China, a move reminiscent of Canada's previous attempts to diversify its dependencies away from the U.S. You're too dependent, some Canadians voice frustrations, believing trade tensions have become a headache. This time, however, the European Union enters the fray as a viable partner. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement has driven tariffs close to zero. Though geographical distance remains a challenge, Canada is determined to create pathways for exporting oil to Asia and Europe, seeking to loosen the grip of U.S. dependence. Should U.S. tariffs persist, could Canada find a meaningful alternative market in countries like China and the European Union? This precarious balance of power is set against a backdrop of uncertainty, reflecting broader fears about global trade dynamics. Each decision taken affects not just the economy, but the future of international relations. What will happen next? The world is on the edge, watching closely. What if the United States suddenly lost its most dependable oil supplier, and a northern neighbor rewired the Pacific into a fresh artery for black gold, dispatching tanker after tanker to distant Asian markets while Washington watches in disbelief? Could a single tariff maneuver ignite a chain reaction that reshapes global energy routes, forces a half-century alliance to fracture, and crown an unexpected oil champion? Canada is once again wrestling with its reliance on the United States. Trump's pressure has sparked a fresh debate. Citizens voice anxiety, fearing that a minor trade flare could cause a painful headache for the nation. The discussion now stretches beyond China, reaching for broader options. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with the European Union has already slashed tariffs to near zero. Geographic distance remains a hurdle, yet Canada insists it can overcome obstacles and channel oil toward Europe or Asia, keeping its hands untied. This strategy grants Ottawa leverage at the negotiating table. The United States imports roughly half of its crude oil from Canada, mostly heavy grades. If Trump attempts to cripple Canada with steep tariffs, Ottawa can point to alternative buyers. China emerges as the most prominent new market, with headlines suggesting Canadian oil could unlock fresh opportunities for Beijing. Higher U.S. prices would erode the competitiveness of American refineries, while Chinese processors could secure cheaper supplies and expand their share of the world market. Canada, in turn, could escape volatile U.S. duties and lock in a colossal customer. Some Washington analysts warn that such a move might backfire on Trump's agenda. Ottawa's politicians grow angry, refusing to be labeled a submissive nation. Trump's threats are seen not only as economic pressure but as an assault on 4 decades of neighborly ties. Public anger surfaces at sporting events, where crowds have even booed the American anthem. In response, Canada contemplates serious steps beyond the Trans Mountain expansion. Projects like Energy East and the Northern Gateway reappear on the table, despite fierce opposition from environmental groups, indigenous communities, and intergovernmental disputes. The argument gains traction: Trump forced us to act. Yet the path to new pipelines is steep. Environmentalists raise alarms, indigenous leaders demand respect, and provincial federal wranglings delay progress. Still, the prospect of greater coastal access to Asian markets fuels heated discussion, as Ottawa weighs the cost of staying bound to a volatile U.S. tariff regime. Will Canada succeed in redirecting its oil flow toward China or the European Union, breaking its historic dependence on the United States? Or will geographic, political, and logistical challenges stall the shift, leaving both nations to grapple with an escalating trade standoff? The answer hangs in the balance, and the next move could reshape the global energy chessboard. In a rapidly changing landscape, Canada finds itself at a precarious crossroads. The tension over energy trade with the United States has reached a boiling point, especially with President Trump's towering tariffs looming over the economy. This trade dispute does not just threaten Canada's status as a dominant oil supplier, it poses existential questions about its relationship with the U.S. and opens pathways towards uncharted waters. But will they embrace China or the European Union in this moment of uncertainty? As discussions heat up about the Trans Mountain Pipeline and possibly extending support for projects like Energy East or Northern Gateway, obstacles arise. Resistance from environmental groups, objections from indigenous communities, and federal conflicts create waves of opposition. Still, there's a surge in conversation about the necessity of new pipelines, underscoring the urgency of Canada's position. A storm brews on the horizon. If Trump decides to activate his tariffs, what's next for Canada? Will they retaliate with robust oil deals, particularly with China? This is not mere speculation. It's a possibility that could ignite the flames of economic warfare between neighboring countries. With proposals for expanding pipeline networks that could enable tankers to reach Asian markets, Canada aims to navigate a more independent trade path. However, the lockdown of energy markets continues to cast a shadow. Volatility looms as logistical costs soar, and the economy decelerates. Canada's entrenched ties with the U.S. seem unbreakable. Yet the drive for diversification trembles the foundations of America's financial strength. As uncertainty mounts, the burning question remains: what will be Trump's next move? His eagerness to restart his tariff agenda looms ominously. Preparing for an unpredictable game, Canada is strategizing alternatives. The notion of a lucrative oil deal with China feels increasingly viable. Could this signal the end of an era of absolute reliance on U.S. markets? As both nations trade barbs, tensions will likely escalate, and the discourse of whether their economic bond will withstand the pressure begins to unravel. Each moment brings a new turn of events, with tankers being dispatched from Vancouver to China, a move that sends shockwaves through Washington. This delicate dance of negotiations, threats, and market dynamics could reshape not only Canadian trade but global oil markets as well. As the pressure builds, will both sides find a way to de-escalate, or will they draw lines in the sand that could redefine their future? The world awaits the outcome, as the two neighbors stand on the brink, anxiously watching what comes next. Earlier, we explored how the looming tariff showdown threatens more than just Canada and the United States. It could shake global oil markets and disrupt refineries across Europe and Asia. The stage is set for an epic clash between two economic titans, leaving the world anxious and on edge. Now, imagine the final act. After 30 tense days, President Trump declares the tariffs will move forward. In response, Canada reveals a bold move: a massive oil deal with China. This sudden twist could ignite a blazing trade war, scorching the economies of both nations. Yet, some experts hold a cautious hope. They believe cooler heads might prevail before the conflict reaches a boiling point. Still, this looming uncertainty sends ripples of anxiety through global markets, unsettled by the unpredictable future. Here's the burning question: can Canada truly pivot and export substantial oil shipments to China or the European Union as a viable alternative to its longtime partner, the United States? Or will harsh geographical barriers and political realities shut that door forever? And what about America? Will these tariffs yield the clean, painless results the administration hopes for? Or could losing Canada as a primary oil supplier inflict a far heavier toll than anticipated? The answers remain elusive, the stakes sky high. This unfolding spectacle isn't just a bilateral dispute, it's a high-stakes chess game shaping the future of global energy and trade balance. The world waits, breath held, as this strange, perilous dance unfolds. What decision will tip the scales? Which move will define the fate of two giants and the ripple effects felt worldwide? Only time will tell. The next move could change everything. What's your take on this unfolding drama?